Hi, I'm Brad Walker, Chief Stretch Advisor at Stretch Lab. In today's continuing education, we're going to have a look at a new stretch for the quad and hip flexors. This is an alternative stretch to the quad and hip flexor stretch that we use as part of our routines. And there's a couple of different reasons why you might want to use this stretch as opposed to our regular quad and hip flexor stretch. Firstly, if you have a client who is pregnant, then this stretch is great because the client doesn't have to be on their stomach. And again, if some people don't like being on their stomach, then this is a great alternative for them as well. Also, when we use the half foam roller during the hip flexor stretch, sometimes that can put a bit of strain on people's knees and can feel uncomfortable. So if someone doesn't like to use that half foam roller, then this is a great alternative for them. So to get into the stretch, what we ask the client to do is roll away from you onto their side. So I'll get Austin to roll onto his side here. So the first part of the stretch here, we're going to do it in two different parts. So the first part is simply focusing on the quads, and then the second part will focus on the hip flexors. So a couple of things to note here. We want to minimize the bend in the hip area here. So we want to keep this hip relatively straight here before we start moving the foot backwards. So as we start moving the foot backwards, we're asking the client for that 7 out of 10. Okay, so in this part of the stretch, all I'm doing is moving the foot towards the backside, and that's emphasizing the quadriceps there. In the next part of the stretch, we're going to emphasize the hip flexor muscles. So to do that, we want to stabilize the client with your hand on their hip there, just above their buttocks. And then what we're doing is we're pulling their foot back towards you. So we're just leaning backwards, getting a hip stretch through the hips there. So tell me when we get to that 7 out of 10. Okay. So and in this position, we can ask the client to contract back into you. So just contract against me, Austin. 3, 2, 1, and relax. Good. And then coming out of the stretch, guide the client out of the stretch. Okay, so that's a great alternative to the current quad and hip flexor stretch that we use at Stretch Lab. Thanks again for tuning in to this continuing education. We look forward to seeing you again soon.